And here we are with a new talk from me for the conference. I will go through the interesting parts of the survey, which is now running since 2020. And we will start just with a general overview, what is technically behind the things, that you kind of understand where data is coming from. And during the recording now, I try to have a bit of an audience interaction. So if you have any questions on the survey or like survey specific questions, or want to see some specific question from the survey, or some field, some topic standards, there's 88 questions in total, but I'll talk about that soon. Please tell so in the chat. And with that, hello to everyone who's listening live or in the conference. And so let's go. And let's see the tour. Quick word on myself. And of course, I organized a conference, and so I don't know if during this talk I can follow this along, and so put your questions in the Q&A tab, and I will be answering them there. I try to be in the launch, but we'll see. You can take the survey on the website. Survey.meetingscpp.com will let you take the survey, and we'll basically, go to that website in a second when we're done with introduction. And basically, people is what forms C++, and for a long time, I had the feeling that we don't know enough about our community, not enough details. There is so much stuff which we didn't measure, and there's still a lot of unknowns, and I wanted to have some data on that. And the goals of this talk is to give you an overview on the statistics which we have now. And there's a lot of other statistics I have. In total, it's 88 questions, so 1 hour is not enough to, and it would be boring to just go through all of them. Take the survey, be logged in if you can. It's around 80 questions, or 88 questions, as I said, 50 minutes for this talk. So we're going to see which subset we choose. If the audience has like a wish, I can make that wish true, but quickly also a word on other surveys. Since some time, every year, isocpp.org and JetBrains do their yearly surveys, and they're great. Please participate. And then also shout out to Bartek, who does on the end of the year, always this end of the year survey. And I do think that's great. And I wanted to kind of, also do surveys, or I've done surveys also in this time frame. This is how the whole idea for a survey tool came along, because I did surveys on Twitter and LinkedIn, and they're quite limited. You have 4 options. Here you can ask, like, have you been on a user group meeting? And you can ask, have you attended a C++ conference? And then this runs for a week or a day or whatever time you want. It's like, I think the limit is a week. And then you can combine it, but it's always a single choice, 4 answers. And with Twitter kind of being short, it's kind of difficult to get the question right. And you're very limited by the lengths you have for answers. And so I was like, it would be better to have something where we actually have control over the data and can do more things with it. And so the idea for the community survey came. In 2020, the survey launched. I implemented it more or less in December 2019. And it's a continuous survey, so it's not like a yearly survey, or it doesn't really have an end. I draw a yearly aggregate from it, so that we know that these are all the answers from this year. But basically, there is not the goal that you answer all the questions for the survey now, and then we release the results of the survey in like 2 or 3 weeks. That's not what we do here. Questions are single and multiple choice. Multiple choice is the one thing that Twitter and LinkedIn unfortunately still not support. And on the right, you see that you can skip a question, you can answer the question, and then you see the result, which is usually a bar graph. Technical details, I decided to make this session-based. So you have a voting session, and I determine if you're logged in, and if you're just not logged in, you're just voting. That's two different sets. I then saw that I can combine questions. I can take the set of one question and look into the voting session and say the buckets of the first question get sorted into the buckets of the second question, and then I can say like I have a question on continents, and then I can say like who works for what on which continent, something like that, or which standard is used on which continents and stuff like that. And then there's like other questions. I have 88 questions, and I can combine them with 87 other questions, right? So there's even more options to present on. I could basically, if I wanted to present every combination, basically present the whole conference on it, but not every combination makes sense. The planned feature I had is like a time-based reporting. I have this, and I used it once, I think, for a CPPCon talk. Right now, it's more like that I plan to have a better use for the aggregates, because it's now 4 years with the closing of 2023 that I kind of want to have a different view on those aggregates to see the trends better. And generally, the votes are saved as an aggregate, and as the vote itself then gets a session and the date, and so that way I know every vote, but also there's an aggregate, and it's kind of has an advantage. And that's also kind of how the combining of question works. Technical details, if you answer a question, it's locked for 30 days. If you skip a question, it's locked for 60 days, and I'm kind of thinking about increasing those times. Re-answering a question in the same session, which if that happens if you're logged in, usually does not add to the aggregate. Finding the questions for the surveys has been sometimes a bit difficult, because you also need the correct set of answers, which makes sense, and it's kind of an art form. Just let's dive into the actual website and look a bit on what we have available there. And that's also kind of where the audience now is important to let me know your questions. I'm generally gonna take a look into Hubilo, and going to take a look into LinkedIn to see how the comments going. And then I need to stop the screen share, and I need to because unfortunately this is like a limitation of the tool I use. I have to find the window now, which is this one. Let's see. Yes. Hey, that worked. Good. So here we are with the community survey, and if I tap over in the window, you see we have a question, which standards do you currently use in your projects? And basically that's, the modern standards, right? Bit of 20, well, actually not. I could skip the question, but since it's not present, what does it? That's kind of boring. And here we see now the survey results. We see that right now C++17 is still in the overall result very popular, and C++20 is gaining. And this is like when we have the yearly aggregates, it's probably like one of the trends we can see, like how every year C++20, once it has been added to the survey, I think it wasn't there from the beginning, has gained popularity. And similarly, we probably will see like how C++11 and 14 have trends in that time. And below here, we see the next question, which we could answer. That's when you do the survey, of course. But for me, let me see. Here we are. What I wanted to do now is now basically go through the results because I don't need to do the survey again. The very first question I have here is the question on JSON libraries. I don't know why I put that in, but I think it was like the first thing that came to my mind as a test question when I started the survey. And here you see just, not everyone uses JSON libraries, and then JSON for modern C++ is the most popular one, followed by RapidJSON. Interesting, like the specialized libraries like ArduinoJSON and SymJSON are not as popular. SymJSON is really, really fast, and I would expect it to be more popular, but it seems to be more interesting for other people to use the well-established and well-known things in the community already. BoostJSON is also something which hasn't been there from the beginning and finds heavy adoption with the Boost users, which we're going to look a bit into because the next question, if I go in the next result, that's Boost. And you see this is like kind of where we can collect the data, and also where we can, for some time, this has been the only data on Boost, but I recently added questions on library usage of Boost, which just started gathering data and like comparing here. This is the question on Qt. But as you can see, I think that's over here. I can go in the survey results, which I am. I'm looking for this one. This is a listing, which of course makes it way easier to find interesting questions for you. And you see there's all the 88 questions. Scroll through. Down here are the newest questions, which are on Boost library usage. And this one is the oldest. Currently has 57 people answering this. And there we see that 10 people have answered for Boost Spirit. Regex is the most popular with that, but not even that gets 50%. But this 57 answers is not statistical relevant, and those categories come from Boost itself. And this is like something I saw this summer, because for a long time I thought that it's impossible to collect data on the Boost libraries itself because there's over 100 Boost libraries. And with the categories, I kind of at least can make sense for that, and so we can get some data on Boost. Otherwise, I'd have to use the combine questions feature, which I can show you here, where you can say, hey, Boost users, let's just go for JSON libraries. What JSON libraries use Boost users? And here I can say that's percent or just overall numbers, and let's go for the overall numbers. And here we see just the first question, the Boost question is now, this is a set which is filtered for people in the same session answering the JSON library usage question, okay? And if we go down, we see that people that never use Boost, there's even like one person which doesn't use Boost, but they use Boost JSON, okay? But you see that there's like a strong correlation for Boost JSON with having heavier Boost usage. And also like RapidJSON is then also kind of popular along the way. And the other popular libraries, of course, are also heavily used. And I find it interesting that those who use often and daily Boost also are very, very often using JSON. That the majority here, which we also saw in the other question, like never, people that don't use Boost and don't use are also not very, often using JSON. And this is like the leading group until often and daily. So we can see quite often some interesting things if we look at this combination feature. But it is, of course, also very hard to find the right combinations which are interesting. There's a lot of questions which are not as interesting in the combination. And generally, if you have any questions or want me to show in a combination, if you think about something, I'm happy to. Yeah. So I'm gonna go now a little bit into the questions here with you. And there's some questions about the standard. Let's just start with the standard. I think we already saw here, like this is the question on what standards do people actually use in their projects. And this is a similar question, but like which C++ standards do you have experience in? So we see C++ 11 is still very popular, and then 14 and 17. And the other way around, 17 is, and I have a single choice question. This one. So if people have to choose a standard, and in this case, it's the most used at work in the moment, we see that C++ 17 in the overall survey since 2020 is the most used standard. And there's even like a good amount of people already having, more than 10% having C++ 20 as their main workhorse, as their main standard they're using. So it's not just a few people which use C++ 20, and I expect this number, of course, will grow over time. Right? Everybody expects that. And I'm looking forward to see this in the data in the future. I could go now into build systems and frameworks. And so I have like a question on sanitizers, because I found it's hard to have data on that. And so let's ask that question. I found it an interesting and easy question because we only have a limited set of sanitizers, and at least for the overall survey data, it is still the case that most people don't use sanitizers, which is kind of scary, but also kind of probably due to the setup they have. Most used sanitizer is address, followed by leak and no memory, then leak, UBN. Okay, not everybody has a useful thread sanitizer. I understand that, but that's an interesting question. If you go into compilers, we also see the normal compilers. It's like GCC is the most popular one, Clang, VC++, and Visual Studio, Visual C++. And sometimes I ask questions twice because, like for example, for build systems. Let me look for the. Here is it. The other question on this. All right, so take a guess with the which is orange graph, right? What is it? This is the multiple choice question here. So people choose CMake because they use it. AutoTools is in this question more popular than Bazel. Make second place, but GNU Make and Make are probably gonna cannibalize on each other. I recently added GN for the reason that someone told me that this is a build system, and that might be news to you. It was news to me. It's a build system from Google, which might become more popular, but Bazel is also heavily Google associated build system, which still, is popular in some areas. I saw recently CLion adding support for it, but it's like when we ask like what people actually think is their favorite CMake. Everyone hates CMake, but when I ask what's your favorite, they chose CMake. That's interesting, right? But at least Bazel is now more popular than AutoTools. That's something. And then yeah, there's people which likes Ninja, MS Build, Isaren. It was not a big surprise, but yeah, CMake has become the standard build system. I see someone mentioning CMake and package managers. I have indeed a question on this. So let's go for the package managers. It's up here right at the beginning. But there's also an easy question which I had in mind when I started the survey. Yeah. People using the package manager is still a trend which is coming. It's a thing of the future. In the current survey result, Conan is really popular, and VC Package, of course, these are the big two. I added in this here because Jason Turner is actually also now had integrated it in his CMake template. And so I was like, well, this is serious enough and good to use for CMakes that I use, that I should add the CPM package manager. I've added a few other ones like Build2, Spec, Buckaroo from Facebook, Hunter. I think Hunter is even discontinued, but I can't remove options from. I can add, but I cannot remove. This is kind of a thing which I have to see if I write toolage to remove something, but it's right now not possible. That's like one of the disadvantages of the survey. But no big surprises here. But let's go for IDEs. And there we have the other question. Also 2 questions, like, of course, I need to know what IDE you're using. And here we see Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code are here since 2020. There's a lot of a trend for Visual Studio Code, which I hope to be able to show you next year when I basically have the yearly aggregates and we can see like the rise of Visual Studio Code. CLion and Creator are not as popular as Vim in this question, and most popular is Visual Studio, which is not very surprising, I guess. And here we see the same question in the same order, but as single choice, not multiple choice. And here we see now CLion is better than Qt Creator in this question. But still Visual Code is ahead in second place of everyone else except Visual Studio. And interestingly, vVim has its fan club, of course, and Emacs is there. But when you only can choose one, what is your favorite? Not everyone that uses vVim thinks it's a favorite. Let me close some of those. And maybe we can get another inspiration from chat. And so there's actually some other questions which I want to go into, and that is the questions which, most of those questions, or some of those questions I so far covered are also covered in the other surveys. But one of the goals with this survey is to be able to ask like all the questions. And it came to my I think it started with a container question. Let's go for the container question. I was like, wait a minute. we have no idea what people do with the containers, right? And how often. And we still don't know what they do with it, but now we know like which containers are used. And it's not a big surprise that vector is being used the most, followed by map and array. But now we have data on it. Before that, we didn't have data. And like, for example, like this is like list more popular than deck. Yes, seems so. With C++11, forward list came. And it's kind of, yeah, if you have the use case, it's a good thing to have, but the rest is not that important. And this question is also like a great example that sometimes you need to put something in a question where some people may think it's a container and other people will say and tell you, well, why it's in the question? Because I'd like to also have data on span. And of course, there's like, priority key and stack is a thing, but span indeed is it's not a container, but I thought it's in this context interesting to also collect data on span to see if span is used. And we see that span has usage, and maybe over time we will see that this is used more. Let's see, there's a comment in the chat. I see there's a Q&A question. Well, these questions are not about the survey. So this is a recording, right? So I'll continue with the survey. So please ask questions about the survey and not yeah. If you have ideas about questions you want to ask, just send me an email. I'm always looking for new questions to add to the survey, of course. Or if somewhere is something missing, then I can add it. And so once I had the container question, I was interested to see how is it with the standard features. That's something else where we didn't have any data on. And so for C++11, we now see that unique pointer and unfortunately shared pointer are the top two features. I understand unique pointer. Why shared pointer? And that threat is not as popular as shared pointer is interesting, to say the least. And of course, there's some not so well-known things, or maybe not so well usable things like async, regex. Reference wrapper is not everybody's things. Random has a user interface which you have to Google every time you use it. Future is, in my opinion, debatable in C++11, and the whole things if people want to use future from the standard, or do they this async, etc. Use a library. And if you go into the library features, these were the library features. Now we're on the language features. We see that auto is the most, but it's like a small lead, followed by lambdas, followed by null pointer, align as, and other like long int, new string literal. Of course, those features are not as popular. That's not surprising, right? Try to get excited for user-defined literals if you don't have a use for it. But then there's this way we know that what is the popular features of a standard. With C++14, that's a bit more difficult because no such things as big features were in the library actually. With the language it's a bit different, but with the library there's shared time mutex, standard user-defined literals, which are in this case very popular. Tuple addressing via type and other, and heterogeneous lookup in associative containers. If we go into C++ 17, but first I should go in the language features, right? Right here. The feature of what came with 14 is also kind of interesting. Generic lambdas is such a thing which everybody is used to now, but it's actually nice to see that this is the feature which takes the first place here. And then there's things like variable templates, function return type reduction, aggregate member initialization, which I think a lot of people now take for granted and might not even. There's like one feedback I have gotten is like some people don't know, especially like if you start with C++ 17, they have no idea what feature came with an earlier standard. So this bit of history, if you happen to know all of those, that's a small group in our community. Now we go to 17, and this is the library features again. Start with the library features. Optional is most popular. File system is fourth. Third is variant, and string view is second place. And then there's, of course, everything else which came with 17. If I have a question on signed, unsigned, no, I think at the moment I don't have that. And I'm not sure if that would make sense. Of course, you could ask like what people use. That might be an interesting one to add, indeed. I don't have a question on that. Would be interesting. If I had one, I could show you. But at the moment, I'm of the opinion that I don't, but let's look for unsigned. No. But hey, sign brings us to design patterns. Let's look at the design patterns. I've mentioned that I added the last questions about Boost, but last year, like 1 year ago, I added in October, September, questions about design patterns. Because Jason Turner wondered in Twitter, what data do we have on design patterns? And I was like, why I didn't ask this question prior. But now we have, like, after 1 year, this is now with 500 answers, getting into the range of being significant in statistical meanings. And this exists again in the favorite and the single choice, multiple choice, so that we kind of can see a difference here. And here we see like Factory and Singleton, I think, are in both the top two. And then strategy, when you have to choose one, is popular, and observer is popular, visitor is popular. And if we go into the classic design patterns and the multiple choice, which in my opinion is really the interesting question here, right? What do people use? We see that observer now is higher than strategy. Strategy actually is not as often used in this. Visitor is still, of course, yes, this variant visitor will probably become more popular even. Factory and Singleton again on the top two. Singleton is a bit sad. It's nobody wants to have that truth, but that's yes. And Memento is the least popular one. And of course, the question to the audience: what is a Memento pattern? Do you know? Maybe it's also just the less known one. So this is the kind of what do we question here? It's like, does everyone know every single design pattern in here? If I do an interview with you, can you implement them all? I think that, maybe Klaus Eagleberger, which also kind of, with this book popularized patterns again in our community, might be able to implement them all. But if you don't, that's okay. In summer, I added another question where we will now see that we are bordering on significance a little bit, but not yet. This will become interesting over time. The other source for C++ statistics I have since 2 years is the Meeting C++ online job fair. And there is a job submission form where you can share your CV and resume. And this form has 2 fields where I ask the skills you have in this case. And this is standard. It's some frameworks. It's unit testing. It's operating systems. So this is like, and package managers. This is like, and there's build systems in here. This is like everything, right? This is like the complete thing which might be important or well known, or should give you like a profile for the recruiter, and I can then pull the aggregate and do the graph. But it occurred to me that it would be interesting to add the question, even if it's like a lot of answer options, to the survey in order to compare the job-seeking population to the overall community population, statistically speaking. The other question I have is on industry fields of work. But first, stay with the skills. C++ 11 is always the most popular one, or has been. This actually changed in the recent times. But this is now a bit different with the overall. There is some differences, but I want to wait until there is like significant statistical answers in here, and then I probably will compare this in a talk, probably in the first quarter next year. And which industry fields have you worked as a C++ dev in is also an interesting question. And similar or equal to the job seekers, it's desktop and embedded. This is a multiple choice question also, of course, is the two top ones. And then it's a wide field in this case, automotive, gaming industry, video processing, science, server, telecommunication. And people working or coming or being on university, being in science. AI not being as popular as interesting, HPC not being as popular, and finance not being as popular. That's all things where I wonder how this shapes when we continue into having maybe 1,000 votes in this. And there's so many more questions I can show you here. I have one question I should probably now show you is the continent question, because there's like, I should tell you about the bias. The survey has a huge bias towards Europe. 2/3 of the survey are from Europe, and then it's kind of Asia, North America, and the rest of the world. This is improving slowly over time, but it's also kind of showing that, most of the traffic from the survey comes from social media, and this is clustering algorithms. And so mostly I reach Europe because my IP is from Europe, and so I mostly get to cluster around people seeing my questions and generally being on Meeting C++ from Europe. Which, I would like to really change that, but that's like one of the biases which I have, which I found. I knew about this bias, but I didn't thought it's that strong. And when we go into the work-related questions, I have a question on how much people earn. That's always interesting, right? So the median, and that's mostly influenced by Europe, is 55K. And if I go and use the combination feature on this one, we use the continent, and then here I should fairly easy be able to, yeah, okay. So now we see like, this is interesting stuff. Now we see like how people actually earn on the continents. Not surprising that people in Africa don't earn that much, and we don't have a lot of data on Africa, so I cannot say anything about Africa actually. We have data on Asia, Europe, and North America. It's like the differences show. Of course, people in Asia don't earn that much, and we have the most data on Europe, so you kind of see the median also here is 55K. One thing that keeps true is that, like, in Europe, it's like people up to 150K. Okay. But in North America, that's basically, where people start. And there's some other people which make less, but it's like the big majority of people here is really in the 100K to over 200K. Might be a heavy bias towards Silicon Valley, where you need to pay those salaries to live. So you make the money and you directly spend it on your living, on your apartment, which costs nice dollars every time. And so it's a bit hard to correlate those, but it's just, interesting data which we can see through this combination feature in the survey. And yeah, programming languages is actually something we could take a look on. That's a good idea. Because I do have a question on programming languages, and this doesn't include C++, okay? Because everyone doing the survey should know C++. So which other programming languages do you know well? And usually those kind of, you use it in a work context. And then we see that it's like really, of course, C and Python is the big ones, and then followed by Java, Bash. Some people do assembly, C#, JavaScript. Rust is something which gains popularity. And it would be interesting to generally over time see how this changes and see how, because this is now an aggregate since 2020, and the yearly aggregates, doing something useful with those aggregates actually becomes more interesting with every year, and that's why I actually want to tackle that next year. I actually have a assembler question, which I can show you with VNet assembler. So I wanted, like, yes, C++ performance assembler, that's close, but do people actually use it? And we know Godbolt has popularized people being able to understand assembler, and people not having a use for it, and Godbolt is the majority, then rarely and often and daily are, this is my categories for this kind of question. So people use it, but if you don't use it in your job and it's not a work requirement for you, it might become one in the future, but that's an exception. Wait, you said exception. Yeah, error handling is another popular one, right? So yes, people do use exceptions. They use bool and error codes and success failure objects. And otherwise, I think this is a difficult question to ask. I think I also have like a question on RTTE. That's not that interesting, I think. A question on Qt versions, like we can really go do in statistical things. I was interested in like how many people do folks actually work with, and this is not the question. This is the question on how many companies, employers do people have had in their career. And here we see it, of course, people starting or having just found the right employer at some time is the majority. And then it rises again with 8 or more. And there's some amount of people which are looking for a job and are like students, and let's look at the age group question. Oh, this is the age group for the survey. The median is in the 30s, and then 40s are strong. And I think to be expected. But you also see that there's some people in the 20s and even below. So overall healthy, I think. Anyways, I think there's still some slides I want to go through, and let me look in the chat if any. I see lots of comments on the programming language questions. And let's go into the survey. There's still like some things which I have in the slides, and I think I'm going to continue with the slides because we've been through the interesting questions now. Or there's like, of course, there's more interesting questions here. So let's bring up the slides again. There. Yep. All right, let's go. So back to the slides. Plans. I've mentioned some of that, but one thing I haven't mentioned, and I think I have never shown, is this slide. It's votes per sessions. And most sessions only vote once. Well, there's a lot of sessions which only vote once. So and it's even true, like if I check on the votes which are from a logged in account, which is a separate data set. And at some point, we have now 491 people with a login having voted. So we're kind of, coming close to having interesting results here. Don't need like 500 people in this case, but it would be nice to have more people with a login, which is like really like unique and better data than not. But the other plan for next year is to basically to purge the sessions which only voted like once, twice, 3, 4, maybe 5 times. This will remove some of the overhead from the survey and reset kind of the overall survey state, but the aggregate still has like the data which what they voted for, right? And I think that will improve a bit of the data which we have in the survey for the overall question. The yearly aggregates are becoming more and more important and are the interesting data points for the future, I think, because we have now 4 aggregates when 2023 closes, and then that is basically where first trends should show and where we can go from a bar graph into a line graph and have various options to, what you want to how you want to filter the data, and this will be a more complicated interface. Yeah, that's the slide. And generally, if you have questions, I try to be on the launch, but this is a pre-recording, so if you want to put your questions in the Q&A tab, I will be able to later answer those questions. But I saw that we had questions in the Q&A tab during the recording session, so I will go into this tab and see. Yes, there are some questions. So let's sort them by most voted. The first question: what are the challenges and learnings out of building and running this survey project? It's actually a good question. I think one of the biggest takeaways from me is the actual data which we now have, which we lacked, and that it's like also kind of the takeaway for me is like that we have to. My data is biased and always will be biased, and it's kind of how the survey works. JetBrains does a lot of work on not having as much biased data, and they have very nice numbers, but they are bound by their commercial and way of doing the survey, and that is a one-time survey, and you only can have, 20 questions, okay? Maybe 30 questions. But I can have 88. I can ask you every single Boost library, and if you answer or not, it doesn't matter. It's more a shotgun approach, and those something. They are different. They are subtle difference, and there's differences in statistics, which I think is interesting to learn from me. And I hope with the yearly statistics, we actually see the trends, which was also one of the motivating questions behind that, because it's the one thing to see what do people use in this year, but it's the other thing to actually see C++ 20 is actually rising, and this is the standard adoption we had for 17, and we lack the data for most of the last decade, and for this decade we will have the data, and then we'll see. Adding questions to the C++ survey, there is the best way probably just to contact me. If you have my email, or mention me in social media, send me a message on LinkedIn, and tell me what your idea about a question is. And ideally, you have a question and the answers. Question on continuous survey: how would you understand repeated votes over a period of time? Using Boost sometime can change too often over time, right? Yes. But if you vote in the same voting session, that will be substrated, okay? So this is accounted for. But if you're not in the same voting question, if you're not logged in, it easily happens that you're not in the same voting. And this is kind of the downside. And that's why I say that I want to purge the sessions which only answered a few questions, then we probably have a lot better data on that. And otherwise, when we have more than 1,000 answers in a question, there's a lot of questions which have only been answered once by that person. So we still get to the statistically significance, I think, to the answer we want. If that answer is 100% correct, no, it's not. It's a bit fuzzy. But if you think about it, yes, that's how the survey works, and it gives us an answer to a lot of questions we would not have an answer to. And it's not interesting if 10.1 or 10.2% use list, for example. Okay, at least from my point of view. Yeah, so we had the question on signed, unsigned. No, I'd be interested to see what questions we can get out of this unsigned and signed, and maybe generally in this field. Yeah, it would be interesting. Question on C++ 14. Yeah, so not as I mentioned, not everybody knows what came with standard. Constant expressions was introduced with C++ 11, but it was very restricted. You could do not a lot. It was basically basic operations. But I think even in a function, you could only return once and things like that. And this was relaxed. That's why it's called relaxed with 14. And it has been further relaxed and improved, and things added to it with every standard. And every standard has something with constant expression in it. And in 14, one of the names for that is relaxed constant expression restriction. Oh yeah, on a question on I do have question on user group and conferences a lot. Let's quickly go into the slides, from the slides again, back to, I can show you that. Let's finish the talk with going into those questions. I need to go in the studio. Slides be gone. And we're back here. Yes, this is a user group question. It's, yeah, people attend, but it's not as popular as you think. There's the famous dark matter developers, which also don't answer this question. But then, yeah, I have data on that. I've showed it in the beginning. So yeah, of course, the survey has questions on that. And C++ conferences. This is a perspective from 2020. Today, I probably also would like to add online and on-site, or to split this somehow. But this is basically still an interesting question to how people attended. I have a question about learning, where also user groups is here mentioned. I think, yeah. So you see, this is multiple choice. So people learn through books, blogs, conferences a bit, but yeah, it's conferences. It's not every employer sends their people to conferences, and not every student applies for student tickets, and so that's okay. Online communities is also almost like conferences. Videos is more popular, which those videos often are available through the conferences. Online tutorials, paid online courses is not as possible, interestingly, and yeah, code examples, which just is yeah. And I do actually have, like, this is like one thing, future plans, 2 questions on conferences, because I was curious, like, and I view this as interesting data to know, like, who has been at Meeting C++, and I have been more than 5 times. There's like a certain amount of people which has not been yet, but wants to be in the future probably. And then there's the folks which, unfortunately, don't have the option to come or don't want to for some reason. And I have this for ACCU, I have that for CPPCon, ACCU. And if we quickly look at those, it's more or less the same deal, right? CPPCon is a bit more popular, so more people want to go there. Yeah, and this doesn't mean that people don't want to go to ACCU. It's just a different set of people answering my questions. ACCU actually has their call for talks out, so if you want to give a talk, you just submit. And I kind of want to retire some of those questions. That's the other thing I want to do next year, to retire some of the questions. We have now 88 questions, and I can think we have some questions which will not change anymore, like RCPP. Do you read Reddit? That was an interesting question in 2020, but it's basically answered now. Some questions are answered, and I kind of want to, at least for the time, retire them. And I think this brings me to the end. Yes, this is the end. Slightly over time now, I see, but that's fine. As I said, if I'm able to come to the launch, I'll quickly be there, but it's probably better if you're at the conference, if you actually have questions, put them in the Q&A tab, and I'll be able to answer them in text there, which I'll have time after the conference. Okay? Thank you for listening. And the next talk in the online track will be me again with CSV file imports. See you there.